Good morning, Andrea. It's time to take our weekly dive into the pond and see if we're just basically going to stay underwater so we don't have to come above, or where we go with this latest episode of The Way Home. And then we are heading over to a little lawyering up on Spencer Sisters. Are you ready to go?
Let's tread water.
Oh, let's... Very good. Very, very, very good. I think that may be foreshadowing. All right, well, this is Eric.
This is Andrea.
This is Hallmark Mysteries
and more.
This podcast was created by fans for fans and is not affiliated with or sponsored by Hallmark or the Hallmark channel.
Okay, Andrea, so I texted you this. I accidentally started watching the first episode again, season 1, episode 1, and I thought they were doing some sort of flashback
For 20 minutes.
For 20 minutes. And I'm like, they're really taking this flashback literal.
Oh my gosh.
And I was going on. And here's the sad part. I was like, wow, why are they doing this? It makes me remind me that the first season was so good and how trashy it's become. And then I realized, I'm like, wait a minute. This is just too long for a flashback.
Hilarious.
And so I stopped, looked at it, and I realized that because what happened, I was on the app and on my iPad, and I just hit play, which I thought usually it plays like the most current one. Apparently it did not this time.
You know what? I literally probably would have done the same thing. So when I went to watch it twice, so I had already, you'd already texted me this, and last night I went to watch it a second time, and I click on it and I was like, okay, maybe I did miss the first minute or so of, the episode, because I'm watching the White Witch run through the woods. And so I'm like, I don't recall this happening. And then when it said Minneapolis, Minnesota, I said, okay, I'm not going to pull an Eric and I'm not going to continue watching. This is clearly episode 1. So I did the same thing until I, briefly was like, why did they, again, same thing. Cause I think every other time when you click it on the app, it went to present, like next episode, not season 1, episode 1. So maybe it's a little glitch, which we all know the Hallmark Plus app has some glitches. So,
yes. Well, my first note of this episode, all caps, of course, you are going to love this episode because it has that whole shot of Minneapolis, which, of course, was
not true.
And the other thing, it said like present day. And that's where I was like, after a while, I'm like, I don't get this flashback. I just don't get it. So.
Well, let's dive into the episode because we are
actual episode.
Yeah, we are almost done here with season 3. So we are on episode 7 this week. So tell me something good. The Landrys and Elliot reach difficult decisions and come to key realizations. So that was the description. And I will say what I liked. I loved the line, if you can't trust a president, who can you trust? I laughed out loud at that one. I thought that was great. They also, obviously, I posted this in my stories. They mentioned Murder, She Wrote and Angela Lansbury. That was clearly written for me. That's all I could think. I was like, what? This is amazing. So loved that line. And then the other one that I really, really, I loved this scene. It might be my top scene of probably the whole 3 seasons. I loved Kat and Elliot's duet of Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. I was trying to find that on Spotify last night. And I'm like, oh man, do they have this so I could listen? I thought they sounded so good together. That was a great rendition. It was kind of like that haunting, and Alice, hits Nick and she's like, isn't this like not a positive song? And he was like, no, it's about nature. And she's like, you mean landslide? I loved that scene and that banter. So for me, that one really, really worked. And I was going to actually go back and watch it for a third time and just watch that singing scene because I thought it was so good. And I thought the other, how Dell walked in at the end and like Elliot kind of, hits Kat and she goes over to her. I just thought that was just such a great scene. So for me, that really worked. And then I guess the other things that I liked, obviously, we have Casey jumping into the pond at the end. Can they time travel? I don't know, because sometimes, again, the foreshadowing of these, hey, maybe they'll pop up and they won't actually time travel and they just jumped in the pond and didn't go anywhere. much like Thomas. And so who knows? So I'm excited to see where that takes it. If Alice is right. And, what about Sam? Is Sam good or bad? And I still think he's good, but I think I'm the only one who thinks he's good. What do you like?
I really liked the car that Evie drove when she went to
That
pick
was a
up
nice
Dell
car.
to take off.
Oh.
I'm not like a car guy. I drive a Prius, okay? So you know where I'm at. But that car was nice, and man, they had it detailed so shiny. That was a cool car.
That was it. That's your
Well,
like list.
I guess it nothing happened really. Okay, yeah, we saw Casey, which we've been talking about. I had it's interesting. We have different takes. All right, I'll go back. Yes, I do think the line about the president was certainly topical. It wasn't just coincidental, right? They were definitely making a little political statement.
Yep.
Nixon, we also get a sense of time because Nixon resigned in August, early August. So we know that where we're at is definitely the end of summer, which makes sense because Dell is leaving.
Yep.
So she's leaving around August. And for those on East Coast, and which I don't know about Minneapolis, but like here, we start school at the end of July. Whereas I remember like back in Michigan and some of the other things, it's always like right after Labor Day.
Yeah.
So
that's how we are.
So yeah, so the whole timing does line up, which is good. I like that. But I guess, and I have my notes about the Angela Lansbury, that yes, she would even say that was far-fetched, which I think Angela Lansbury would say the whole Pond season 3 is far-fetched. But I did take my notes and I go, when I had the Minneapolis, like, oh, Andrea's going to love this episode because of that. My next later on down, I was like, okay, well, she didn't get Minneapolis, but she got Angela Lansbury, and I don't know which one is going to be better for you there. No, now you throw in Minneapolis, Angela Lansbury, and then a little cozy house on a farm. Oh my gosh, you'd have this like 10 out of 10.
That's what The Way Home is. They have a cozy house on a farm.
So, all right. Well, like I say, I just didn't really find many answers. Not that we expect to have answers. We've talked about Casey, and I have twofold with her. First, like when she came into the, and saw Kat and Alice, and they sort of had their little, Alice is grilling her, and then it's like, oh, I'm gonna leave and go see catch up with my parents. Why didn't they follow her to find out if she was being legit? Right? They're like, hey, you're a time traveler, you're not a time traveler. They know how to play the game where you just sort of say, oh, I'm going to go meet up, and you just then walk back to the pond and swim away. So I found it like a little bit weird how they didn't follow her. And at the end, why does Alice stop? Right? She wants to know. She's chasing her.
You don't know if Alice is going to jump in, and then will Casey and Alice end up in the same time frame?
Well, we know that the pond doesn't really follow its rules anymore. So,
I mean, Kat tried, remember, and she didn't end up going anywhere. So that's what she said. I think it was this episode.
I guess I don't know. And then wait, you mentioned Thomas. So when Thomas dove in, did he just come back? Did I miss that? Where he just came back up?
He just came back up, and it sounded like he had done that a lot, and he was, so throwing in the towel. Like he's been trying to get to Kat, but he's just not able to. That's what I gathered.
Actually, I liked that scene. I thought Thomas, and I will say, her going back and the kiss and everything with Thomas, so much more chemistry. Like that's who should be together. And then the karaoke, my line there is, this is the worst karaoke scene ever. And I love me some karaoke.
And I'm over here like, this is my favorite.
Right. That's why when you were saying it was like your favorite, I was like, huh. So
good.
Like Kat just once again, like right as they're finishing up, and then she just stops and walks off. She doesn't just finish
Elliot,
the song
because
she has no control, right? Impulse control. She just, I'm walking off stage, kind of like how she just walked
Elliot
right in on Emma and whatever. He didn't say. He just said, "Hey, look, your mom's here," and didn't mean like you have to quit.
Well, I mean, yes.
And so, but I will say also, you're doing karaoke, and I guess the joke is like, yeah, Nick chose the wrong song. But come on, you choose like "Bad Out of Hell" or some like big boom, boom, boom song. So I get it, that the joke. But Silver Springs was a song, yes, written by Stevie Nicks about her very, very tumultuous breakup with Lindsey Buckingham for Fleetwood Mac. So, yes, not the lover bring you together type song. It's exactly the opposite, which is obviously the joke of the song. And the name comes from Silver Springs, Maryland, where she's Lindsay, or excuse me, Stevie Nicks just saw the sign there. And when I go to DC, and when I ran the Marine Corps Marathon, and I used to work for Chipotle, and we used to go there all the time, I stayed right in Silver Springs. So I very much know about Silver Springs. I know everyone's fascinated with the
Oh
fact
my
that I
gosh.
stayed at the Marriott in Silver Springs, but
Ah,
I can tell you all about it.
oh, please don't.
What
All
would you
right,
What would
what?
you choose for your karaoke song? Oh no, you did
Time,
Michael
Love, and
Bolton.
Tenderness, Michael Bolton.
Yes,
Time,
I
Love,
knew
and Tenderness, Michael
I didn't know
Bolton.
the song. I knew it was going Michael Bolton. All
Yeah,
right.
that's my favorite. Well,
Have you ever done karaoke?
no,
Oh,
no. What we
love me some
didn't,
karaoke.
what we didn't like,
I just
um,
did it, so
you
yeah,
basically didn't like the whole episode, but I haven't shared mine. So
right.
mine, kind of you hinted at this. It felt like well, you didn't say this part, but it felt like a bridge episode for like what's coming. Again, not a ton of new things happening, which I don't think is a bad thing because we have so much going on that I don't know if we need any more threads pulled, because we have to close some of these loops eventually. So for me, it felt like more of that, as you had said, if I want to fall asleep, I'll watch this one again. It was a little bit of a slower episode. I watched it twice, and I find it entertaining. And I know a lot of people like really deep dive into it and like pause it and look at the books on the shelves and do a lot of deep dive into this series. I just personally I don't know why. I'm like, I don't know if it's just not my jam or I'm just not pulled in enough. I don't know if I like any show well enough to pause and like really get down to the nitty gritty. Like I just am not that invested into any of my shows. Even Murder She Wrote, I'm not going to pause and be like, did I miss something? That is just my personality. And so for me, like my Myrtle book, I've made it, I think, maybe halfway through, and then I've forgotten where I put the book. So like that is just like I'll be invested to a point, and then I sometimes am like, well, so that I finished my Golden Girls coloring book, which was about 250 pages in 1 year. That is remarkable because I am someone who, again, usually displaces things and doesn't quite complete. So that's probably maybe your personality. If you finish and you're like watching and pausing and wanting to be invested like that, maybe that is just something where you really like these type of shows, movies that make you think. And then maybe there's Eric and I who
Well,
half
actually,
invest.
ironically, I do like that, and I'm
I
more
was going to
of that
say you
personality.
seem,
But
yes,
I think
this
for
is
me,
not
it's
drawing
because
you
I'm
in.
not invested in the character. Like if I
Yeah.
liked them, I think I would be a little. Now I don't know if I would be doing the full out going back to once purposely watching an episode in season one to try to tie it together. But I would definitely be more like, oh wait, this is what it is. Because I'm watching Severance right now on Apple, which is
Mm.
very way intense, and try and piece that together. And then you go into Reddit and you try to find like, oh wait, what this means something. I do it, but I guess it's just because I'm not invested. Like Cat just like
Now that you
I
say it, I'm
can't do
like,
it.
yeah, I would do that for a Timberwolves game. Like I'll rewatch basketball, which makes sense
The
because I know it so well. For me, that is the interesting part of like, so I was watching the dunk contest last night and like one of the guy who won like hit the rim with the ball and then went up and around over it. And you could see it is very fast, but like they slowed it down. And he even said like replay so people could see how intricate of a dunk it was, which is amazing. But like that to me, I'll get invested, but I think I have to know something so inside and out. And just as you were saying, am I invested enough in the characters to do that? And for the series, I guess it's a no. Whereas the NBA, it's a
like
yes.
put it this way: if this was Mistletoe, and Mistletoe was an eight like episode type one instead
I
of
would do that.
the
Yeah.
two solve, I probably
You would
would
do
be
do that.
way more like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wait, what this this is the season, episode 3, because I would watch it again enthusiastically, whereas watching an old episode, like, oh, torture, right? So, by the
Well,
way, you should
yeah.
have been watching instead the USA Canada hockey game. Much more exciting than
I'm not a hockey
basketball.
person. Like I've never
Well,
seen a
you're
hockey
from,
game. Like
I
I'm
know, and
not,
you're from Minnesota.
no.
You are literally going to get kicked out of the state.
I know. Southern Minnesota, we're basketball people because there's no hockey teams down there. So we're more basketball folk. That's where I grew up.
No, question for
Um,
you. You said you
yeah.
like watch like a recorded game, so like a game you'd already seen and stuff, but if it's
No, I
on the
won't do that.
oh, okay.
I will like, pause it, replay like a move
Okay.
if they, did
Right,
something and
okay,
if
okay.
I'm trying to like learn how to do the move. Now this would have been more when my playing days, but like or coaching days when I coached basketball because you're trying to like break down that so you can teach other people.
The reason I
So
say it, 'cause my wife, unfortunately, I've got my Detroit Lions who have not been to the Super Bowl, and she's got her Pittsburgh Steelers who have 6 of them, and it's always on where they'll replay like the
I
Super
thought the
Bowl
Lions were
thing.
in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and they
No,
lost.
thanks for
Oh,
that little
sorry.
deep wound.
I mean,
But
hey, the Vikings haven't really either. So
the but she'll like watch it again and just be nervous, and I'm like, the outcome, but she still gets like nervous and tense towards the end and things. So
that's funny.
all right,
Well, our standout scene or performance for me, I already said it, that diner singing scene. I loved it. I thought it was so well done. Clearly, Eric didn't enjoy it, but I mean, again, the Nick and Alice thing, I guess it's not creepy anymore, but it's still kind of weird. Adult Nick with young Alice and knowing that they kind of
yeah.
dated when, I don't know. That's just a really weird mind trip to like kind of think about that whole dynamic. But it's fine. Like Nick is like for me, has Nick added anything to you like in this? No.
No, but I don't dislike him, so he
I
hasn't he
same,
hasn't done
same.
anything negative.
Like I
So
feel like
he's
he must have been brought back for some sort of purpose than just he's kind of a comedic relief at this point or kind of a sounding board for Elliot at times, but I feel like he's got a something has to be happening with Nick, right?
I think so.
I
Because he's
hope.
also got this like weird, shady, I'm traveling the world on a yachty type background.
And he's got his fiance,
Things.
is it fiance girlfriend now or wife? But we've never met her yet, so
So yeah, so I think something's shady about his past. So
yeah.
he's like kind of like a Sam, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, actually.
something's there, but we don't know what.
Yeah. Well, what about you? What was your standout scene?
It was the Cat and Thomas
The
having
kiss.
their like her going to him and just being like, whatever this but complaining about Elliot, and then he doesn't even think twice. He just comes in and is like, no, you're my woman. Takes her in, kisses her. She runs off, dives into the pond, and I thought it somehow I don't know how I missed him not being able to go wherever he was going, but I thought his dive was just such conviction because usually like they kind of run and do this like little jump feet first, which he's like, no, I'm head first into this thing. I am going after this woman, which like that's what I want in the chemistry, right? Not
Mm.
Elliot. I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. So yeah, not
Oh.
give me more Thomas, less Elliot.
Well, what we're hoping is coming or not in future episodes. For me, I feel like we're back in that Colton time travel as the main plot point. Can he? Is he?
Yeah,
And again, that's something that for me, it's not one I overly care about. Obviously, I feel like I should at this point because now he might have been the person who went back to Jacob and told him to plant things. I don't know. There's a lot there then that I feel like that could be a setup for next season. I just don't know if I don't know if I care enough. So that I'm fearful of that for
but
myself.
does anyone actually believe Colton does not time travel? Right? Like they're trying to make it a red herring, but of course he
I mean,
does. If
especially in the
like the
bedroom
shocker would
scene.
be if he didn't actually time travel.
I mean, with Evelyn in the bedroom and how Alice, like that whole scene, it seemed like he was shutting things down because he knows he can time travel. So I don't know. What about you? What are you hoping or is not
I,
or is
like I
coming?
say, it's what I've been doing all the time. Give me some answers of who Casey is. I want to know her. Once again, though, going back to like Alice, okay, I'll give you that. Like, oh, Alice knows the pond has its own mind and may not. center where Casey goes, so that's why she stops. Okay, but I also found it just weird that they run into each other like, oh, I'm sorry, this, that, and the other. By the way, where did that ring come from? And then just runs away straight to the pond, as opposed to, oh no, I'm not quite sure, my whatever, mom got it and she gave, like, you could easily lie. You don't have to run straight to the pond for that reaction. So I found it weird, but it's probably driving what's happening in the next episode, so they had to have it happen. But so that's, like I say, I'm just trying to give me more of that where that is. And I guess Thomas and Sam, those other characters who I'm more invested in those than the primary characters.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on this one? For me, my final thoughts were, so for who can time travel, we're assuming that it's mostly the Landrys, maybe the Goodwins. And then so that's where Casey would
Everybody.
have to be able to fit in there. Well, since Thomas couldn't,
He can.
like, again, you have to have the right last name. I don't know. So I'm intrigued by that storyline. But then who would Sam be? Is he a time traveler as well? Or, like all of those things, I'm curious to know who can and who cannot. If Dell tried to, would she be able to, now that she has been married to Colton?
I figured it all out.
Or,
Casey is Susanna Young, the young Susanna. That's my big bold.
Okay.
That's my big bold prediction.
I'm pausing, thinking. I'm like, I don't know if I agree, but okay, we'll see. Who knows? I mean, why not? Why not?
Exactly. There you go.
Right.
That's boom. That's my big thing.
Got it. All right. Well, now let's jump in to the Spencer sisters. So this episode, the lawyers lament. Darby's ex, Lucas, hires the sisters to look into threats against his fiance. So for this episode, what I liked that it showed us more of Lucas and Lindsay's relationship and how they might not have as much in common as we previously thought. They fleshed out Lindsay a bit more. I felt that the minor, the guy who was doing the talking and the protesting, he felt really believable in the cast. He had great eyes, loved his eyes. Loved Victoria and her date and how he played along with her when it was like the Onyx Point CEO. And he was like, yeah, let's come on over. And how they interrogated him together. I thought that was super fun. So I'm loving their relationship. And that's like a perfect match for Victoria energy wise to like, oh yeah, I'll stay there with you, which then we'll talk later about, his scene in the kitchen, because that's comes up later in my notes. So all of that for me worked. I also, that's something I don't like. So I'll save my more comments about Lindsay, Lucas, Des, and Darby, because I think my prediction might have been true that I said last week about these four. So what about you? What do you got, Eric?
I think this may have been my favorite episode of the season.
I think mine too.
I liked literally everything about it. I think we may have a similar type, like what you didn't like, which for me is more of a little feeling than actually. So, but when, so let's just go back to the beginning. When Lindsay is, asking Lucas for help picking out the napkins and everything like that. Love that scene because she's like, I will say I personally can relate. That's, my wife denies it.
I can relate to them as well. My mom basically decided all of our wedding stuff because she was like, you don't have decorations picked out? I'm like, no, that's not my forte. No.
But, so I'm going to go a little deep dive here.
Oh boy.
I'm guessing that there was some promotional stuff for this Vector cereal, because at the beginning he grabs that box of Vector cereal and pours it, and later on Darby's pouring it at the house. Vector is like very prominently displayed, right?
Didn't even notice.
I looked up, I'm like, is this a real thing or is this like one of these fake movie cereals? It's a real, sold in Canada only.
Okay.
As a meal replacement that boasts a whopping 13 grams of protein. However, it's highly controversial. It's a Kellogg cereal because it apparently only actually has a modest, like just over 5 grams, but you get to the 13 because of the milk. And so a lot
Okay.
of people are very, and they say it tastes just terrible and everything like that. So it's
Well,
apparently
yeah.
like a big like controversy in Canada. So Canadians, if you know about this, let us know because there. Because then you go forward and you got Victoria making her little yogurt parfait, which actually has as much protein as Vector cereal. So you can have that instead of the Vector
Thank you
cereal.
for giving us our
Yes,
protein
there you go.
updates, Eric.
There's my breakdown of
The
their
episode.
breakfast. By the way, I love the scene when Billy comes out wearing her robe, and I'll, I'll I'll let you talk about it a little later. That was great, but Victoria once again, her like, when you're dancing cheek to cheek with a prospective lover, there's no overcompensating like way to overcompensate. Her like just little tiny comments, and the most Victoria moment though was when they met Lindsay's boss, Kyle. And he's like, "Oh, those are rope burns on my hands." Like, "Oh yeah, kudos for you for S&M." Like, I mean, she's like the only person who can actually get away with that. And then she was like, everyone's like looking like, "What the hell?" She's like, "Well, isn't that the most obvious assumption?" Which, of course, only Victoria has that assumption. So I thought that was great. I also liked it going back to that scene when Lindsay's asking Lucas for help picking out napkins, of which such a dainty, soft thing, and then it goes to Lucas telling Lindsay, "Hey, I need you to pick out self-defense thing," and she's like, "Okay, go for the brass knuckles." Obviously, sorry. Like the juxtaposition of the two of those, I really, I really liked that. Then towards the end, when Darby asks Ian, "Are you really asking a woman if she knows what it's like to be demeaned at work?" I just thought that was a way of making, in a little comical, slight way, making a really big, powerful statement. So I loved that. Yes, I have in there the scene with Billy and Victoria at dinner when they, posing as the PR people, which I will talk about later. And so I also love when Des shows up and Lindsay, like Lucas gets all awkward. Lindsay is like, "No, no, no, you come on in." This that like awkwardness, right? But I also have other feelings about that awkwardness too, right? So we'll talk about that. And the last thing I'll just say, does Ian look familiar to you?
I mean, a little bit.
He's been in 11 Hallmark movies in the last 2 years.
That
He's
would
in
be.
Hanukkah on the Rocks, Hanukkah on Rye, Follow Yonder Star, Haunted Wedding, Santa Summit. He's not obviously the lead, but he's been in
Interesting.
a bunch of Hallmark movies in the last couple years. So I was like, he looks familiar. And sure enough, yeah, he's just that like constant extra or like,
Uh,
secondary type character.
nice. Well, I mean, for me, like what I didn't like, there was really not too much. I mean, I don't have anything besides what I said last week, which I thought was going to happen is Des and Lindsay are going to end up together, Darby and Lucas. And this episode definitely set the table for that of, hey, Des and Lindsay might have more in common and Darby and Lucas might have more in common. That would be my only thing. Again, if I didn't like, it's not like you don't like it. It just, I don't like that plot point. I don't think a ton. Like it's a very predictable one and it's too tied up in a bow. I mean, obviously it can happen in real life, but there's just a lot of red tape and it just is not, it kind of feels icky if you really think about it. So for me, that's what I didn't like is, oh shoot, I think that's again, I don't know if we're going to get there because, we only have 3 episodes left because it's only one season, but that's what I feel like they might have done maybe if there is a season or if there was a season 2. What about you?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Like
Yeah.
I say, I thought it was funny and cute, but then I thought about it and it just kind of like, no, I'm a very big team Lindsay, Lucas. Like I like them together. I like Darby and Des together. And I think, right, it's a little contrived to do that. So I agree with you 100% there. I will say though, I used to work with this girl and her parents got divorced and married the neighbors who got divorced. Like they swapped.
Yeah.
So
See,
her
that's where I
dad
said it
married the
happens in
neighbor
real life,
wife,
but it's in a
and her mom married. And then
weird.
make it even crazier,
They switched
it's just
houses.
like they just moved, like
Oh my gosh.
they kept their houses and kept being neighbors.
That's so weird.
So, and it wasn't
So
like a
weird.
swinging thing. It was just weird, right? So
Yeah.
it can happen,
Yeah.
but I 100% agree with you. I don't want the story to go that way. Like I will say, okay, here's my one negative. When they were playing, I don't know if it's actually Risk or simulated Risk, but when they were playing games, Lucas and Darby, and they had like what they would say a moment, I'm like, no, I don't want you to have a moment, right? Lucas, you're engaged to this wonderful woman, and you know, Darby, you have Des, who's a super understanding guy, like what you see at the end. So
Well, what do we think about the actual mystery? So for myself, as soon as the coworker referred to himself as the work husband, like instant red flags for me, I was like, oh, this guy is clearly involved in some capacity. At first, I was thinking, oh, he might be sleeping with Lindsay because to say that, I'm like, I again, because of this, four-way love triangle situation, I was thinking they're trying to make us not like Lindsay. So then, Darby and Lucas can be together. And so at first I thought that was going to be the angle they took. But then, as it went on, I was like, clearly that's not the angle. And he's probably the guy who is doing it because, I mean, that's just a weird thing to say when someone's engaged. If you're like, hey, or even if you're married, like, that's not a common thing. Like I work with a ton of males and I wouldn't say this person's my work husband. Like that's just not good. That's just not good when you're in a relationship. That's kind of red flags. What about you?
I thought it was a great mystery. We kind of talked about how they don't necessarily often do murders, but once again, is a really clever mystery. I'm with you. As soon as you saw the assistant, yeah, I kind of knew where it was going, but I love their investigation. Like when, like we talked about, Victoria, does the thing at dinner. Darby, when she comes up, her look, oh, I'm the assistant PR, and she goes into that like little youthful Valley girlish type boy, like, oh my God, like that was great. Just their whole investigation, I thought was really fun, really interesting, and a great case. That is part of the reason I think why I like this series so much because these cases are just, it's not everyone falling dead, right? It's good PR type stuff. And speaking of PR, like when they run into the other PR guy, like that was hilarious. So,
I also
fuck
think
it.
this one they had the least amount of like mother-daughter conflicts. So I enjoyed that
Yeah.
too because that was way tapered down.
And
So
they
for
like
me,
had that
that
really
worked.
touching moment at the end, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, what do
Yeah.
you want? I want you to be happy, right? So they do have their little bicker, but it's in like a very fun, not that
Yeah.
confrontationally way, I don't think.
So standout scene or performance for me, we kind of already hinted this, but I really liked the duo with the game night that we happened, and then the dinner shenanigans. With Victoria and her guy. I can't remember his name. What's his name?
Billy.
Billy. So those two, how those were kind of going back and forth, and then following it up with the next morning when he comes down in the robe of Victoria's and like that whole situation, and how he was just like so nonchalant and like not embarrassed, and like some people would be like, oh, and shy away. So you're like, clearly this person again can match that Victoria energy of like, I don't care, I don't give two flying bleeps, like this is just me. And so for me that really worked, and I can see those two, like those two are fun together. Like that's a fun
Absolutely.
couple that I would love. I hope they stay together throughout the next few episodes because that's a fun pairing. What about you?
Couldn't agree more. They're absolutely great. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'm not going to sit down because, like, are you wearing underwear? Please, I won't sit down. So that was a great scene. And to be honest, that scene and then the one that I chose, which was we talked about too, when they're having dinner and Billy, sees like, oh, I know what you're doing here. It's just a coincidence that we're here with your suspect. And in so many other ones, you'd have the boyfriend would get like
Nah.
annoyed, right?
Yeah.
But no, he's like, all right, I see where we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Little Google, follow my lead. And they
Yep.
go over there and he just goes in beautifully. Eh, You sum it up, like just he matches her energy so perfectly without them being like, because she's over the
Noxious.
top, but
Right.
he's kind of there, but he's a little more grounded with her, right? And it's just such a great chemistry between the two that I just absolutely love. And so they go back and forward, and it was really like, actually, like I say, I liked the mystery because of how they investigated, did a great job and made it very believable. You're like, oh, I haven't heard that case. Oh, that's because she's so good at her job that it never became public, which is exactly what the CEO is looking for. So he opens up and, just quick on their feet and just back and forward. So yeah, I loved that scene. And like I say, yours as well was absolutely fantastic.
Do you think so? I know people commented on Dolores from like the Hannah Swensons, like how her character is versus Victoria. They're probably kind of going for similar things, don't you think? But I find Victoria more of a grounded character in some capacities where I can see why Dolores can rub people, but I don't know why that is. But do you see kind of a similarity there?
Absolutely. I think because they're that like person who's just like, I don't want to
Just gonna go
say
for it.
aloof, but the thing with Victoria is she does it, but she does sort of like gets to the edge, which I talk about all the time. Go right to the edge without going over. Whereas I think sometimes they have Dolores get to where she goes from being comical to being like a farce, right?
Yeah.
So kind of Victoria, like that's S&M line, right? Where the capture with her looking around, like everyone else is like looking at her like, what the hell? And she's like, what, right? And I think that was just a great way to deal with some of those moments where she is just, a lot. And I think sometimes, right, with Dolores, who I absolutely love, and I don't have a problem with her. I think she's delightful.
Same.
But I can see, yeah, it's like, ooh, you went a little too far with her whole, I'm
Doesn't seem
Dolores.
smart at times, I feel. But I feel like Victoria seems, well thought out and an
Right.
educated person, whereas Dolores, I feel like they might teeter that line of her looking silly and stupid, where there is a line there. And I feel like that would be probably
And
where we might notice.
we've also got to see Victoria's vulnerabilities too, right? So she's a little more human in that aspect.
Yeah, we haven't seen a ton of that with Dolores. That is
No.
a great point. Wow. Well, for me, any final thoughts? I just see the cracks forming between Lindsay and Lucas. I feel like that's what they kind of set us up for in this episode. I still haven't watched the next ones, so I'm excited to kind of dive into those and see if hopefully I'm wrong, but I feel like we'll see. We'll see. What about you?
I'm just excited. Like I said, this was such a good episode. I'm
Yeah.
super excited for the next one.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, good chatting with you.
All right. And by the way, going back to the pond for 1 second, I'm still not, since season one, the fact they are not walking around drenched bothers me to no end. They've never addressed.
I thought that they were a little more wet in some of the episodes. Did you not? I thought I noticed a
No.
little bit more.
They may be slightly damp, but it still annoys me to no end. On that note, let's just focus on Spencer Sisters. We get to watch another one. Depressing. There's only there's three more after this.
Yep.
Okay. Kind of sad. Hopefully we get season 2. Until next time, Andrea.
Bye.
Goodbye.